Welcome to Conversations with Barbara. I'm Barbara Kanellopoulos. My guest today is Donna Wald. She is the president of the board of directors of Cape Cod organization, Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. Welcome to the program, Donna.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. So we've been heartbroken over Buffalo and what happened in Texas. And now just this morning, another mass shooting in Oklahoma. Would you agree that we have a public health crisis on our hands, a gun violence crisis?
I would totally agree that we do, and it should be handled as such, because that takes a lot of the politics out of it. If you handle it as a public health crisis, the protocols for the legislation and everything are totally different. We definitely have a public health crisis with guns.
Yes. And I know that the grandmothers are working on the legislation, but taking the approach of gun violence as a public health crisis means that we can supply people with a lot of scientific research. And I think that we need to make sure that people understand what we mean by scientific research, controlled, exact, reliable, reproducible research that's exact and has nothing to do with opinion. And because there are so many myths that people have about gun violence that simply are not they don't stand up to the evidence. And I know that the grandmothers have worked on this for a long time. Before we go into some of that research that the grandmothers have done, just let's tell viewers a little bit about the organization.
Well, the organization was founded after Sandy Hook. We're going into our 10th year this year, and it's a nonprofit, it's nonpartisan, and I always need to say in these things, we are not about taking anyone's guns away. We are about figuring out the issues we have and safer ways to live in this environment that has been created for us. So our main push is on gun safety. We'll talk about that later. And we do legislation. We work, right now we worked really hard. There are bills in the House, and we worked really hard on the safe storage bill that's being debated today in Congress. So that's what we do. We educate, we have meetings, we have rallies. We really see education as a fundamental component of this, because you can't be persuasive in an issue if you don't understand what it is you're saying. So that's basically what we do.
Yes, and it seems to me the information that you have is evidence-based through careful research. And there's a lot that while we're waiting for our legislators to deal with this, to do something sensible and morally right, there's a lot that individuals can do. And let's talk about that. Let's, for example, a person, what are some of the steps that each one of us can take to maybe assist the prevention of violence?
Well, it's kind of interesting because over the weekend, so many people were so distraught. We've all been speaking all weekend and last weekend and all week. And one of the things when I was asked to speak that came to me, and I think it came out of that we've been working with the Congress. I think this is where it came from. You know, we've all been waiting for a watershed moment. We thought Sandy Hook was a watershed moment. We thought Columbine was, and we go on and on and on. But what occurred to me with what I know about Congress now and how I work, and this is a really sobering thought, but the American people are the watershed moment we've been waiting for. Sadly, because it is our votes that put people where they are. It is our voice which should be driving legislation. So I would encourage, as to your question, I would encourage everyone at this point to either join a gun violence prevention organization, to write letters to the editor, to vote for sure, to advocate, to rally, to go to meetings, to do whatever it takes, because we are the watershed moment. No one else is going to bring this home but the American people.
That is nicely put. That's exactly the case, isn't it?
It is, and it's pretty scary, you know, because it's up to each and every one of us, and it's up to us to also talk to our friends in other states, because that is the key here, because a lot of the other states are what's holding up the situation. And here's a statistic for you. We know that 98%, anywhere from 85 to 98%, depending on the issue, are for more reasonable gun laws and restrictions. And yet, where is that voice?
Yes, that's so interesting, because yes, most Americans do believe in these background checks and other such common sense gun laws. Right. And you're right, even though, say, Massachusetts has strong gun laws, although there's more we can do, those states with safe gun laws are not, people can move across to another state where there are none. So it's cold comfort to know that we have, that Massachusetts is safer than other states.
Oh, I'm really glad that you say that, because people think, oh, we're safe here. It isn't our children. Well, the way I feel about this, these are all our children. I'm sorry. And until you get that attitude, even if you're in a safe gun state, there are guns being trafficked into Massachusetts all the time. We know that.
Yes.
You're only as safe as the weakest state next to you in gun laws.
Exactly. And we have, I hope this legislation for these things called in Massachusetts called ghost guns that cannot be traced because they're bought online and they're assembled by the buyer, and there's no serial number on them. So Massachusetts has a way to go as well.
Well, they do, and there's a law. I just like to say for your listeners, there's a law before the Public Safety and Public Homeland and Safety in the Massachusetts legislature right now, which means it has to be voted favorably out of that committee to get a vote. So any one of your listeners can call anyone on that committee, and you can find that by going to the Massachusetts legislature site and call them up and say you want to see them pass that bill. It's that simple. I mean, we do it all the time. We have it on an action list. We write postcards on that bill. So that's what has to get done. They have to hear voices.
Yes, I so much like what you said. The watershed moment is us.
Totally.
Yes. And so then for 10 years, the grandmothers have been putting out this information for people to dispel some of the myths that we hear about. And let's talk about some of those. For example, the myth that an armed citizenry is more safe than unarmed. We have.
Well, it's funny you should bring that up, because we're working with two researchers right now, and one who has a book coming out. He's a famous author. He's got 4 or 5 books on gun violence, and we're working with him and a young candidate who just finished his PhD on the history of the NRA from the 1950s all the way to now. So talk about myth building. So we're going to be working with them toward the fall when the book is released to actually do a campaign on that.
Oh, yes, I think that would be.
So that's exciting. And, as to your question about, are we more safe with guns? Well, we have 400 million guns in this country, which is 1.2 guns for every man, woman, and child in America. So we can see how safe we all are. We can't even go to the grocery store without getting shot. So,
yes,
you know,
yes. And we also have this scientific research statistics that show that our household, a person in a household or a family is not safer if there's a gun in the house. Now that really needs to be dispelled because so many children are killed because there's a gun in the house. Can you address that in more detail?
yeah, I can. In fact, the law we worked on is called Ethan's Law. You'll see it when you see these bills come up. And the mother, Kristen Song, is the one, she's been all over Washington with this. She's an amazing woman. Her son ended up dead because of an unsecured firearm. And he was a teenager when that happened. So the minute you bring a gun into the house, you increase your risk of things. That's just the way it is. You increase the risk that a young child will get a hold of it. You increase the risk that if you've got anybody suffering depression or being a little moody, if they're a teenager in the house, the risk of suicides increases with a gun, suicide by gun. If you're in a domestic abuse situation, that's the worst of all of them. You're 5 times more likely to die of a homicide in a domestic abuse in your own home if there's a gun there. So, it's not for those people that say, oh, I'm afraid, somebody made me afraid, I need to buy a gun. That was one of the reasons we made our pamphlet, You Can Save a Life Now, because we wanted to try to get to those people first and show them the risk.
Yeah, the evidence is that there are more suicides by gunshot. That is the most gun violence that we have in the country. Suicides by, and it can be prevented. The question about prevention is there is an opportunity to prevent because I understand that the suicide is a sudden act that need not happen if that person has a chance to think things over. I know that you have a number of steps in this wonderful brochure that will allow people to intercede. Can you tell us more about that?
We do. The thing about suicide by gun is last year there were 45,000 gun violence deaths. Anywhere from 55% to 66% of those were suicides by gun. That alone speaks to the fact that with a safe storage law, things could get a lot better. We have with suicide, it's often, but not always, but mostly a fleeting event. And if you have a gun, it's a permanent solution to a fleeting event. That's the sadness of it. If you choose some other way of suicide, you're likely to be found, more likely to be revived, more likely to get to relive that decision. With gun violence, you aren't.
And so often we find that the person who commits a violent crime with a gun, this is certainly not always a mental health issue, but sometimes that person, mental health or not, can show signs that that person is a danger. And so those red flag laws make it possible for somebody to intercede. Now, it's not that complicated. Can you take our viewers through some of the steps that one can take if you know that someone is a danger to himself or herself and to the rest of us?
Surely, if you look at the shooting in Michigan, I believe it was, where the child was a problem. He was in the office with his parents. And he had been drawing things, saying he was seeing things and demons, and he couldn't stop himself and whatever. Right there, right then, somebody should have said, okay, he may be a danger to himself or others. Let's have a mental health evaluation and let's possibly issue an ERPO.
Right.
Instead, they said, why don't you go back to school? And we know what happened then.
Yes.
So those are the things. Let's say you are in your house and your husband or someone is saying, oh, I really don't like my life. I think I should just kill myself. I don't, whatever. That alone is enough. And there have been a lot of couples that have taken ERPOs out on each other out of sheer concern and nothing else. Just you go to the judge, you make your case, and if the judge thinks there's reasonable harm to you or anyone else, there's a hearing. If there are guns involved, they will get taken away for a year. And then after a year, you can appeal. And by then, a lot of that is just a waiting period to let situations work themselves out.
And it has shown that it does work. Now, that process may seem formidable to some people, but it would seem to me, I think one of the brochures says that an easy option is just call the police department. Can they then?
They can, I believe, especially if it's an emergency, they can definitely do an emergency, ERPO, but I guess sometimes I don't just want to see restraining orders issued because we know what happens with restraining orders half the time, and somebody ends up dead.
Yes.
2 weeks later. So I really think if you're scared enough for yourself or somebody else, I think you can call the police. You can go to the court yourself and get the paperwork and do it. There's a lot of ways. And I see these ERPOs, red flag laws. I think they're going to expand the criteria of who can do them. Because right now it's either a spouse, I think it's a ex-spouse that's lived in the house for X period of time. It's kind of a really tight circle right now of who can do it. But as other states implement them, I see the criteria going out further of who can issue one, which I think is good. I think there could be misuses of it, but I also think it would be nice if health professionals were able to do that.
Yes, and so that so much violence can be prevented in this way.
Oh, definitely.
Right. And certainly legislation also is important. But there are other things that individuals can do. And it seems to me that your brochure also talks about certainly steps in gun storage. There's this notion that maybe a hiding place is good enough. This is going back to the idea of having a safe storage. So we need just a hiding place isn't enough. Children have a tendency to know where things are hidden.
So, they do. And more than that, children in that same study that's referenced in there, they also, over 45% of them admitted to having played with a gun. So you're like, okay, I guess it's not stored well enough.
And I'm thinking about some of these others, very important information. All of that is here, and that at the end of this of our talk, we will have an address where you can email the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence to get a copy of this really excellent handout that has so much valuable information for individuals.
Yeah, we made that specifically as a resource. On the front is kind of why you should listen to the argument. In the back is where you can go if you have these issues, or if a friend has an issue, or and one thing I'd like to stress is you don't have to have a gun. You don't have to own a gun for this pamphlet to be valuable to you, because you might know somebody who's in a domestic abuse situation. You might know somebody who seems a little depressed lately. And it's very possible you have children that play in other children's houses where there are guns.
Yes, there's that issue of children's play dates. People should not be hesitant to find out if your child is going to go to play with another child in a household where there is a gun. So there are, just as parents might ask about other safety issues, then asking about the existence of a gun is important.
Oh, exactly. A while ago, we were at a fair in Plymouth. We were invited up there. It was a really nice day. They had a health fair, and it was mostly young families. And they were going by, and one woman said, "Oh, I don't need this. I don't have a gun." And I said, "Well, you know what? I wish you'd take it, because there's a very good chance that your children, when they go on play dates, might be playing in houses with guns." I said, "So there might be some stuff in here that you would like to look at." And it was so funny. It just floored her that, "Oh yeah, I never thought about it like that."
Yeah, we don't think about that, but it's very real. So, if you look at it as a safety issue, just as you would be concerned about other reasons why you would want to have your child not play somewhere, and it's always removing the location to one's own home if you really feel that it's risky.
Oh, exactly. That's great. I mean, in fact, that's a good conversation starter. I mean, you can always say, "I was just wondering if you have any guns here and how they're stored, because I'm glad to have the kids at my house."
Right.
It really doesn't blame anybody. It just says, "Hey, here's an option."
Right. It's a reality that we have to live with and do something about. And I so much appreciate that the grandmothers against gun violence are taking a stand and being so active. Tell us something more about your local activities here on Cape Cod.
Well, we do the rally at the Rotary every month, other than the heavy winter months, because we know we have so many tourists driving by here that it's good to have them see a message like that. And it's for a number of reasons. It's good to have them see that they could do it, that they can stand out, that they have a voice. We do a lot of speaking in and about, especially during this crisis period here. We've done a lot with the churches. And what's really sad is this time I have seen more despair over these past 4 weeks than I have ever seen in the whole time I've done this. People are just destroyed. And at this point, I would say just keep an eye on everybody you know, because different people process these things differently. And just be sure everybody's safe, be a little kinder, be a little better, just keep your eyes open, because these are, for some people, really traumatic times.
Yes.
And let's see, what else do we do? This weekend is Wear Orange Weekend, which is Gun Violence Prevention Weekend. How ironic is that? And so we're having a bake sale for grandmothers down at the Dennis Bandstand with music, because number one, we always do something for Wear Orange Weekend, but it's a good way to have people come, because when people feel like this, they like to come, they like to talk, and we like to get them to sign up to do things, because then they don't feel so helpless.
Yes. The only way to ward off despair when we think about those 9-year-olds who will no longer be with us, and we saw their smiling faces. It's just heartbreaking. But the only answer to that and the despair is to do something. And your organization offers an opportunity to do that.
Well, and we've worked with a lot of mothers of surviving mothers. And I am here to tell you how those women keep going. I don't know, but they have founded movements. They have founded gun violence movements. They have driven legislation on the Hill in Washington. They're just an inspiration to watch. So some people turn that kind of grief into what I call righteous anger. Yes. And they keep going. And other people, it just changes their life forever.
Yes, it does. And you had said to me earlier that you've been spending all day following the legislation. Can we kind of outline what's happening now on the political side of this in Washington?
Well, there's about 8 bills that were brought forward by the House. One of ours was one of them. In the markup, what happens is everybody goes back and forth. It's in committee. So the Republicans go back and forth with the Democrats and they say, well, how about this amendment? How about that? What about that? And then, of course, you hear all the myth busting you can possibly stand. And so that's that part of the process. I think tomorrow they're going to vote. I think from the inside track we have, the purpose of this is to just drive these bills through because they're really decent bills. And then we know they'll go to the Senate and they probably won't make it through the Senate because of the political environment. But at least it's like, I call it just moving the noodle a little bit further. Pardon me?
We'll identify those who are stalling.
Exactly. It will put the senators who don't want to keep our kids safe and don't want to buck the NRA and don't want to let go of the NRA money. I mean, we know who they are anyway, but it will, in an election year, it will put them squarely in the, we don't want to do anything here. And it's really depressing, but we think that's probably what's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that you stop just because, I mean, we've been here before. How many times have we been here before?
Yes.
And it's like edging away at a cliff. You just keep going till you get it done.
Yes. Lots of public health issues have been solved with good information, with steady work on the part of organizations like the Grandmothers. It's slow, it's incremental, but we can look to issues like all of the myths about cigarette smoke, the blocking of good information. Eventually, we have made great strides toward stopping that killer of cigarette smoking. And so it takes a while, but we mustn't lose patience. I would certainly hope that given the immensity of the problem of gun violence, that this is something that needs to be moved forward quickly. And I hope that that the work that you're doing with the Grandmothers is going to be pushing this issue. And I certainly awareness, making sure the public is aware and knows the truth of this is a big step forward.
Oh, it is, because we spend so much time on it that sometimes we get thinking, well, everybody knows this stuff, what's wrong? But really, we probably know 500 times more than the average individual. So we consider it our job to educate, put it out there. And like one argument I would like to dispel, because you hear it so often in the news, is when somebody says, well, no law could have stopped this shooting. Well, the point being is that that shooting could have happened in any other number of ways that a law could have stopped. That last shooter in Uvalde could have gotten an unsecured gun from his home and done exactly the same thing. So when people hide behind the, well, you can't stop a madman from killing somebody. Well, our position is, with 400 million guns, we weaponize a lot of mental health issues. We weaponize hatred. We weaponize bigotry. We weaponize anger. We weaponize revenge. We weaponize everything. And people have to realize that when people say, well, people kill people, guns don't kill people. And I would agree with that, because no gun has ever pulled its own trigger. But what I would say is, then why do we keep giving the wrong people guns?
Yes. And of course, simply to say that we need to improve our services for mental health is also sidestepping the problem. There are many therapists and doctors are saying somebody with a mental health problem isn't necessarily violent. So we don't want to assume that everyone who shoots is sometimes, as you pointed out, it's simply hate,
Right.
anger, and that's
there's so many drivers. If you look at every way gun violence can happen, they're right in saying no one law will solve everything. But we aren't talking about one law. We're talking about a suite of 8 laws that are addressing some of the major areas. So they're right. No one law is going to stop any of this. But, if you understand why some of these things happen, you can put evidence-based solutions all along the ladder of gun violence and reduce some of this.
Yes. And starting with very simple background checks, and also making sure that gun sellers are licensed. These are not difficult things to do.
No, they aren't. And you see, I'm encouraged to see, though, that a lot of gun owners in America have figured out that if this continues like this is not going to be good for their sport.
Yes.
And a lot of gun owners are saying, look, when they look at what happened on January 6th, for instance, they say, if this kind of stuff keeps up, this is not going to be good for us. And a lot of gun owners are solidly behind these reforms.
Right. I think what you said expresses it. Guns weaponize every aspect of human behavior that is not positive. And so we are simply unleashing that range of emotions and weaponizing it.
Yeah, I think that is, that takes it kind of further down the pike, and we need to keep going further down the pike in order to understand why we get these things. Like today, that shooting in Oklahoma, the guy was obviously upset with his doctor. Well, he had 2 guns, and somehow this culture has decided that the way to solve your anger or whatever else it is, your racism or your bigotry or whatever, is with a gun.
So that you're suggesting that it's also part of one of the things that we have to resist is it's the culture, that we need to change the culture. Is there something about our culture that has misled people into thinking that it's heroic to carry a gun?
Oh yeah. That's why when we do the myth thing, you will see that. Oh yeah, our culture thinks it's. I mean, why are all these shooters men?
Yeah, yes. Yes.
Okay, because
telling.
they've been advertised to that it's the macho thing to own this gun. It's the macho whatever. And that run is coming to the end for the manufacturers because they've already been sued twice for inflammatory advertising, and the plaintiffs have won.
Yes.
So yeah, it's
You mean to say that the manufacturers are promulgating that awfulness?
well, they are, because way back they needed to sell more guns because almost everybody had a gun that they could sell to. So they made new weapons, they made new advertising, they spun a bunch of wrapping it around, manliness and patriotism and the rest of this. And then here you are.
All for profit. And look what it has brought.
Well, yeah.
That's really dreadful.
Well, it is. And you think of all the Americans that complain about how the corporations are using us. Well, the gun lobby has totally used us.
Yes.
Pardon me.
Right. Yes.
So yeah, it's a complex problem, but you can't just sit around and say, oh my God, it's just too complex. We can't deal with this, because it's going to deal with us if we don't deal with it.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I'm so encouraged by the work that the grandmothers are doing, and then people can sign up on the website, and obviously donations are also welcome.
Yeah, and you can sign up, and you can sign up and not even be a member if you don't want to be, because what we want you to do is receive our newsletter.
Yes.
And get educated. And if you feel better doing that, well, that's good, because we just, it's going to take all of us. And the people that work like grandmothers do and the other national groups, this may sound cold-hearted, but when stuff like this happens, we just get harder than we were before, and we just come harder than we did the last time.
Good.
And maybe we're starting to get numb to it, or we just handle our grief in a different way, but we just come harder. Not to say we don't cry. I mean,
yes, you don't give up.
No.
You don't give up, and we mustn't. What did we say earlier? That the antidote to despair is to do something.
Yeah, I'm going to share a little story, because this was when I did cry. I have a 10-year-old grandchild and an 8-year-old little girl grandchild who's amazing. And they know I both work in gun violence prevention. In fact, the girl once called my group her heroes. So when all the shooting happened, they found out, the little ones. And so my daughter in California had to sit down and explain. And she said they were all crying and it was not good. And she said we were explaining. And my little granddaughter looks up and says, should we tell Nana? So I thought, what is that? Does she think I can fix it? It made me cry, because I'm like, did she think I could actually fix this? Or was she afraid that if I found out I would be really angry?
Right. Yes. Perhaps both. Perhaps she was thinking of both issues, and maybe hoping that grandmother, who's doing good work, is part of the solution.
I know, it was heartbreaking. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is heartbreaking.
Yes. Children who go off to school and expect it to be the safest place in the world. It's just unthinkable.
Well, and then when your other question was, do more guns make us safer? Well, 19 guns in that hallway didn't save those children.
Right.
And I'm like, what was that?
Right. Yes. Well, remember that someone in the, I think it was a leader of the NRA, said that the only thing that can defend a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and that has turned out to be totally false.
It totally is, and there's actually stats to show that is just so not even true. In fact, a lot of times what happens is more injuries are sustained because you have a gun trying to defend yourself than if you didn't even have it. And sometimes you provoke an incident that you would not have provoked if you had just been there defenseless.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to be very careful of these mindless cliches that people use, and look instead toward the evidence, the scientific research that is telling us exactly what's happening in the country.
Oh, we totally do, because then when you look at the evidence, you can, well, look when we had automobiles, when we had all those car crashes and everybody was dying of car accidents. We got seatbelts, we did the research, we did road signage differently. We did a lot of things differently. And if you could only get past the rest of this verbiage on guns and approach the gun problem that way, we wouldn't have it.
That's right. The research was overwhelming that seatbelts were saving lives. And we need to have that kind of understanding made clear to those who are in power and those who are resisting change and resisting the kinds of laws that would make gun violence less frequent.
We do. It's amazing. We look to our northern neighbor, Canada, who just said, okay, forget it. No more handguns.
Right.
It's
right.
amazing.
Yes.
And,
right.
And you know, I like that when foreign countries do that, because what it means is our manufacturers are not going to be able to be selling them guns anymore either.
Yes, and we're hearing from Australia, from New Zealand, with evidence that their gun laws have made a huge difference.
Well, they have. I mean, it's just, if you look at our stats compared to the rest of the world, I am ashamed. I am ashamed to live here.
Yes, I am too.
It's for other people to look at us and say, what is wrong with those people? Can't we get this under control?
Right.
It's embarrassing.
It is.
And heartbreaking.
But I'm heartened by the work that the Grandmothers is doing. And I think that, again, viewers, to get some really great scientific research, evidence about things that we can do ourselves, along with voting in the midterm elections and voting also locally. The addresses will be at the end of this program. They will be listed for you to write down and contact the Grandmother's email to have these brochures sent to you. And I thank you, Donna. I cannot thank you enough for being here. And
well, I thank you for having us and thinking of us, because to us, part of the comfort in this whole mess is that people invite us to speak, that people, the churches, you people, a few other interviews I've done. So just so you know, we take comfort in the fact that in times like this, that people think of us.
Yes. And we're eager to hear the truth and eager to hear what we can do. And I want to thank viewers for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you all next time on Conversations with Barbara. Thank you, Donna, so much.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yes.